And when I came in, I hadn't really had an English 9 per se. I had taken speech last year. So I had to take English 9 last semester. So I had a wonderful experience with Mrs. Crosso. Not because of the learning, what we learned. It wasn't really that much new information for me, but I did learn a lot about teaching and about how to deal with people. She taught me to care about other people, because me coming into the public school system was a big step for me. It was like a shock for a sheltered homeschooler to go among all these people who talk about all these things that really, when you're hanging around with your family and church friends, you don't hear a lot about. So, when I went to that class, she adopted the idea from the Freedom Writers movement to have people journal before she started the lesson every day. And so every Friday we had what she called Free Write Friday. So we wrote about whatever we wanted to. And it was really encouraging for me, because here I am coming into this public school. I'm really uncomfortable, and somebody cares about what I'm saying, and she's actually commenting on what I write down. That was a big deal for me. It made me want to care about what she said, because she cared about what I said. So, for the future, I want to learn to focus on others more. Teaching is a good thing, but I think it's really most effective when you become a sculptor of beautiful pieces of art. And that's what I would like to become, especially as I pursue becoming a Christian minister. Theodore Roosevelt once said, "Nobody cares how much you know until they know how much you care." Does anyone have any questions?
In the topic of teaching and learning, you had an experience with Mrs. Zarn's class over in the other building, and afterwards you talked to me quite a little bit about what you learned about teaching from that experience that you hadn't really understood before. Can you talk a bit about that?
Well, I worked with kids before, counseling at 5 Pines, but I didn't really have to motivate kids to do much. So when we went over to Mrs. Zarn's class, a lot of those kids were just a lot of the kids at my table were really behind. So it was hard to get them motivated to catch up and keep working instead of just drawing or talking with other people, running around the classroom. So I found out pretty quickly that, well, actually, it took too long to figure out that I couldn't just say, do this. If you don't do this, you'll have to do this. Negative consequences didn't work as well as positive rewards. So eventually, the last day that we taught, one student was just really having a hard time focusing. So I got to ask Mrs. Zarn. I actually asked him first, what would motivate you? And he said, computer time. So I asked Mrs. Zarn, if he does this such and such an amount of stuff, can he have computer time? She said yes. And that made him just zoom through the work. And it was really cool to see that negative consequences don't work as well as positive rewards for motivating people.
Thank you.
And when you're like a homeschool, was it just like you, or was it like a whole bunch of other people?
Well, I come from a family of 6, so most of the time I had siblings. Through junior high and my last year, freshman year, we went to what we call homeschool co-op, which is basically a gathering of a bunch of homeschool families. The moms are the teachers. So you have, like, Dr. Harrison was at that co-op, and so you have doctors teaching science. You have physical fitness trainers teaching physical education. You have people who know what they're talking about, teaching about it instead of just learning out of a textbook. So for the last 3 years, I think it was, I was attending homeschool co-op, which was just 3 classes. We would meet every Thursday. So for the 3 classes that Mom didn't want to teach me, she would have me take it at co-op. So that was probably over 100 people. So it was kind of like a miniature school.
You like it better?
Homeschooling is more academically challenging for me. because you're continually working on stuff instead of talking with people. Here, if somebody is behind, then everyone has to catch up until, everyone has to be there with everybody else. So if somebody is ahead, the other people have to catch up before these guys can keep going. So there's a lot of time, I think, wasted in public schools, but at the same time, I learned a lot about people here. So.
Are you all the youngest?
I am the youngest. Yes. Justin?
You said that, like, first semester, writing and, like, specifically writing for a person, being a teacher, like, really helped you kind of connect with the community as a whole. Has that continued into this semester? Like, maybe not necessarily in an assignment sort of way, but do you find yourself still writing and still using that as a way to kind of connect with people? Or has it was a stage and then
I don't write often enough, but I find that when I do, I communicate the best because I'm generally a slow person. My mom didn't teach us to be fast; she taught us to be thorough. So.
yes,
So I have journaled in the past, but that's usually just when I need to process things, when I need to just get something off of my mind. But writing letters, writing emails, stuff like that, I do that sometimes, but not very often.
And then also, what would you say was like the biggest, pro, pro to this concept?